Today, we're talking about the truth of the eclipse. As you probably know, the eclipse occurred today. Now, there is a lot of information going around about it. And today, we're talking about what it really is and how to harness this transformative event in self-transformation and transforming the world. So we're going to be taking a look how to understand the power behind this event, how to understand this event in a true, real, rational way. But before we do that, we're going to be taking a look at some of the conspiracy theories going around about this. There's everything from, it's the rapture where Christians are going to vanish and go to heaven. Obviously, that didn't happen. But there's also this idea that CERN is doing these experiments to contact the demon, and that there are ritual sacrifices occurring, and that it's altering the energetic structure of the astral body. All these different ideas going around. So we're going to be taking a look at some of these ideas and seeing what they're about. And then, of course, more importantly, we're going to see the truth about the eclipse and how to harness its power for self and universal transformation, which is what's really important. It's what it's really about. So that's what we're going to do. And we're going to get started right now. But before we do, hey, please, as usual, hit like and subscribe. Why should you hit like and subscribe? Because this channel is about spreading information, spreading knowledge. It's not just about entertainment or cool videos. It's about actually transforming consciousness. And how this is done is by spreading information, spreading knowledge, spreading wisdom, spreading reason. And when you hit like, when you hit subscribe, it tells the algorithm to show this to more people. So I really appreciate it. Please do that. On that note as well, please follow me on Spotify. If you have a Spotify account, look up Dawn of the New Earth. That is my Spotify podcast channel. You'll find all these videos that you can watch there in a more accessible way. And it helps out a lot. Like I said, it's about spreading information on various platforms. We're growing really fast on Spotify, so go give me a follow over there. Also, my new book, Neogenesis, Dawn of the New Earth, or Dawn of the New Mind, I'm sorry. Dawn of the New Earth is my podcast. Dawn of the Neogenesis, Dawn of the New Mind, my new book is coming out May 16th. So mark your calendars for that. And I believe that's everything. Is that everything? I think it is. All right, let's get started. We're talking about the eclipse, and there's all these different, conspiracy theories going around. And well, first of all, what is an eclipse? Hopefully, most of you know what an eclipse is, but there are surprisingly a lot of people who don't look into things at all. So just if you don't know, a solar eclipse happens when the moon moves between the Earth and the sun. That's it. A solar eclipse occurs when the moon moves between the Earth and the sun. And we experience that as a shadow effect on Earth. So it's just one celestial body blocking another celestial body. But what does this have to do with all of these different ideas going around? And is there something more to it than simply just one thing blocking another? Is it just as simple as that? Or is there something actual and substantive behind this? And that's what we're going to find out today. Now, first, I want to take a look at some of these ideas about CERN, because there's a lot of wild ideas going around about CERN. And let's take a look at what's going on here. So this is on iflscience.com. And it says conspiracy theorists think CERN has wild plans for 2024's solar eclipse. So it says the Great American Eclipse will occur on North America on April 8th. And we know that it already occurred. Now, among the most ridiculous theories involves the European Organization of Nuclear Research, better known as CERN. The story goes that CERN will be testing out its Large Hadron Collider, or LHC, the world's largest and highest energy particle collider, on April 8th to coincide with the 2024 total solar eclipse. So here is the idea. First of all, CERN is always attracting a huge number of conspiracy theories. There are these theories that they're trying to open portals to another dimension, that they're creating black holes, all these different ideas. Now, they're saying that on April 8th, CERN is trying to do an experiment, which would be today, to coincide with the solar eclipse. And there are people who are believing and saying that it has to do with contacting a demon. Now, why are they saying that it has to do with contacting a demon? Because people are crazy. No, well, yes, but why are they saying that? It's because Aleister Crowley on April 8th had contact or claims to have contact with a being known as I was. So if you don't know who Aleister Crowley is an infamous magician. And when I mean magician, I don't mean like magic tricks. I mean like actual magic with a K. He actually is the one who started spelling magic with a K to differentiate it from like magic tricks and things of that nature. So magic is about making change to reality according to one's will. And Aleister Crowley is an infamous magician. He was once a member of the Golden Dawn. And he left the Golden Dawn and started his own magical order known as the Ordo Templi Orientis, which still exists to this day. He also started his own religion known as Thelema, which comes from the Greek word for will. The holy book of Thelema, of Aleister Crowley's religion, is known as the Book of the Law. The Book of the Law is a very short read. We'll probably read it sometime on my channel, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. But the Book of the Law is a short but very interesting book that's the holy book of Thelema. And Aleister Crowley claims to have written it by channeling an entity known as I was. So Crowley doesn't even claim to be the one who wrote the Book of the Law. Crowley claims that I wrote the Book of the Law and that he simply, transcribed it. He was the instrument, or he was the transcriber of the information communicated through by I was. So there's this idea that because Aleister Crowley supposedly had contact with this entity I was on April 8th, and CERN is doing an experiment on April 8th, and there's an eclipse on April 8th, then CERN must be contacting I was for some reason. Okay, so let's really break this down, and we're going to get in detail on what the eclipse actually is and what it truly is and how we can really understand it in a very powerful way. But I want to talk about this just because it's a very good example of problems in the spiritual community in general. Okay. So what is CERN? It's an organization that involves a piece of enormously complex scientific equipment known as a Large Hadron Collider. So what does CERN actually do? What is CERN doing with their Large Hadron Collider? What the Large Hadron Collider does is it accelerates particles at an extremely high velocity, nearing light speed, and then essentially collides these particles together, smashes the particles together, hence Large Hadron Collider. And these particles that smash together at near light speed, they break up. And they study how these particles behave and break when they collide at high speeds. That's what it is. That's what it does. It's nothing. It's not about opening portals. It's not about different dimensions. It's about smashing particles together. So it's not about contacting demons. It's not about anything like this. It's extremely interesting and very cool and very scientifically and technologically advanced. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it has to do with matter. And so it's really, in essence, a very primitive way of doing things. You're smashing stuff together and seeing what happens when you smash it. It's very much like cavemen banging rocks together and be like, "Ooh, what did that make?" It's very advanced, but on another level, it's also very primitive. So it's still, you have to remember, when it comes from the perspective of scientific material, most science is predicated on materialism, which is the belief that reality is matter and only matter. So the Large Hadron Collider still simply deals in matter. If you were trying to contact a being like I was, or open a portal to another dimension, it would have nothing to do with matter or particles or smashing things together. It would be about entering into the internal immaterial mental unconscious domain. So this would most likely have to do with, say, modulating the filter of the brain for consciousness expansion or consciousness tuning. Nothing to do with smashing particles together. And so scientific materialism specifically, denies the existence of an immaterial domain. So long story short, it's very silly to think that the LHC and CERN are trying to communicate to some demon on the day of the eclipse, because literally it's about smashing particles together. And the Large Hadron Collider is deep underground anyway, where the eclipse would have no effect. It wouldn't do anything. It has no bearing on smashing particles together underground. So honestly, if they were trying to contact Iwas, if they were trying to contact another being, I think that would be much more interesting than what they actually do. I think that if they were at the level where they were trying to be like, oh, let's see if we can access other domains and other dimensions, that would be interesting. I think that would be fascinating. But no, it's unfortunately just about smashing particles together. So this is why it's important to understand that reality is not a material reality. It's an immaterial reality where matter is just a temporary manifestation or a particular manifestation or a projection. Underlying reality is the frequency domain, the domain of mind, the domain of pattern. It's a mathematical reality. This is all just a projection of a fundamentally mathematical reality. So CERN has nothing to do with other dimensions or contacting demons or anything like that. Be a lot more interesting if it was, but it isn't. So no need to worry about that kind of thing. That's not what is going on. So yeah, it says it's also sometimes the subject of conspiracy theories, often involving themes of parallel universes or other dimensions. But it has absolutely no bearing on that sort of thing. It would be very interesting if it did, but unfortunately it didn't. Now, there's also this idea about so Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene says she thinks it's a sign from God that America needs to repent for its sin. Her post on X suggested New York's recent earthquake combined with the eclipse were strong signs. God is sending America strong signs to tell us to repent. Earthquakes and eclipses and many more things to come. I pray that our country listens. And so much so that some Christians believe that the rapture was going to occur today. Obviously it didn't. And for those who don't know what the rapture is an event that precedes the end times or Armageddon. And what the rapture is essentially all believers in Christ are allegedly going to just disappear, vanish instantly, and be transported to heaven. Yeah, really. And remember, I grew up as I was a Christian, strict Christian. And so I believe this. This is literally what's taught to be true. I believed it so much that as a child, when my parents would leave to go to the grocery store or something, I would turn on the news, turn on the TV on the news so that I could make sure that the rapture wouldn't happen. It's a really effed up thing to teach a child. Everything in the Christian religion is a really screwed up thing to teach a child. Like you have the potential of burning in hell if you screw up for eternity, that there's a God in the sky that's reading your mind constantly, monitoring your thoughts. It's a really screwed up thing to teach again. So a lot of crazy stuff in there. But there was this idea that the rapture was going to occur on the eclipse as well. So much so that some of you may have heard about this, but there was actually a lady who was going around tipping people very high sums of money, very large amounts of money. She was tipping people because she believed that she was going to be raptured today. And so she was basically like giving her money away. And so this is on Reddit. And this individual writes, I'm a server at a taco restaurant in Florida. Last weekend, we had a woman come in that tipped me $300 on a $40 bill. So the bill was $40 and she tipped her $300. And she tipped her $300 because she believed that she was going to go to the rapture. So, hey, she might as well give money away. And it says, as I was getting into work, I saw her at a table with a guy who was presumably her boyfriend or husband, and she was being served by one of my coworkers. He knew she was the $300 tipper, but didn't give her any special treatment. According to my coworker, she kept asking if he was a Christian, to which he said no. And then she started talking about how awful it'll be after the rapture, which she thinks is on April 8th, this Monday, for sinners left on earth. Yeah, by the way, after the rapture occurs, it's supposed to be basically like torture here. There's going to be, I think, 7 years of peace, but then 7 years of basically like hell on earth. Like demons are going to come up from hell and torture people, and the Antichrist is going to rise to power, and it's not going to start chopping people's heads off if they don't get the mark of the beast. And there's just a lot of crazy stuff that's bonkers. None of it's rooted in reality. But anyway, continuing here, it says, my coworker said that he thinks he'll do fine. He was kind of vying for the tip, so he didn't want to contradict her belief. According to him, he took their order as normal, served them, and the woman tipped him $777 because she said that he'll need it after. 777, there's that, the holy number, 7. So first she tipped someone $300, then $777. Now look, if she were just a generous person, there'd be nothing wrong with that. That's totally fine. But do you see the very real consequences that these beliefs have? These very real consequences cause people to behave in ways that are completely divorced from reality and divorced from existence. And what actually is going on here? So what's happening here is a phenomenon that, in my opinion, is the biggest obstacle for spiritual people in reaching higher consciousness. Now, when I say biggest obstacle, I mean specifically, like I said, for spiritual people, not in general. In general, the biggest obstacles are mainstream religion, scientific materialism, and capitalism. All these things work hand in hand to suppress your consciousness in one form or another. However, when people break free from this and they start to think in higher ways and new ways, the number one impediment here then is apophenia. So what is apophenia? Apophenia is the mind's tendency to link information or events together that have nothing to do with each other. And this is actually something that is extremely common because we as human beings have evolved to try and find patterns. So we're always going to be looking for patterns. We're always going to be trying to find a pattern. So what is apophenia? Well, apophenia, one form of apophenia is known as pareidolia. And pareidolia, what's that? Well, it's when you look at the clouds and you see shapes in the clouds, like a face or an animal or a dog or a tree. I'm sure almost all of you can relate to that experience. You're laying in the grass, you're looking up at the clouds, and you go, oh, that looks like a duck, and that looks like a face, and that looks like a Christmas tree or something. That's known as pareidolia. And it's a form of apophenia. It's about recognizing patterns when those patterns aren't actually there or connecting reality. So the idea here is that when people are making connections that aren't there, they are becoming more divorced from reality. Now, it is important to make actual connections and real connections, but apophenia is when one makes connections with things that aren't there. So basically, when people think that a solar eclipse, right? When people look at, oh, the solar eclipse is happening on April 8th. CERN is doing an experiment on April 8th. Aleister Crowley contacted a demon on April 8th. Clearly, CERN must be doing an experiment to harness the power of the solar eclipse to contact the demon I was. No, but it's the same phenomenon that's happening when someone looks up at the clouds and goes, oh, that cloud looks like a bunny. Unfortunately, though, here is the unfortunate aspect here is this has very real world repercussions. It's not just, looking at clouds in the sky. That's not harmful. But this actually can have harmful consequences, like this woman, if you believe that you're going to be raptured, well, maybe you start giving your money away, or maybe you start taking risks that you shouldn't, or who knows what. But when you believe that these things are true, it leads to a lot of issues and a lot of problems. And this happens across the board with a lot of people who are getting into spirituality because their intuition is on overdrive. And so they're trying to connect things together. And connecting things together is not inherently wrong. It's very important to raising your consciousness, known as concept networking. But concept networking should not lead into apophenia. Apophenia is concept networking gone wrong. basically what's happened is that when you start getting into this like intuitive spirituality, first of all, you left behind your old belief system. And that's usually when the dark night of the soul occurs, where it's a very confusing time. And you're like, oh shit, everything that I believed about reality is totally wrong. Like maybe you were a materialist atheist and you started realizing, oh shit, reality isn't just material. It's actually much more complex. There's a whole field of energy that lies behind reality. Everything is connected, etc. Maybe you were a Christian before. Maybe you were some other religion before. Whatever it is, you realize everything you believed is wrong. And so your mind no longer has a way to make sense of reality. Previously, it had a model to make sense of reality. Oh, well, everything is just clearly an aggregate of atoms, and it's a molecular structure that has evolved over, eons. Or, oh, this is all a creation of God. God created it in 6 days, and we're all here to repent for our sins and go to heaven. Whatever the case is, your mind had a way of modeling and understanding and making sense of reality. When you realize that all this is not true and step away from it, your mind essentially no longer has a system to organize the information, the incoming information. So this is usually what leads to the dark night of the soul, which can be very confusing and depressing and sometimes results in isolation. So what people usually do then is they usually start to turn to intuitive spirituality, because this offers some way of understanding reality. Unfortunately, their mind is now on overdrive trying to make all these connections, and they start making connections that aren't there. You'll often make connections that are there. In intuitive spirituality, this often happens where it's like, oh yeah, they did get a lot of things right, like that reality is fundamentally frequency, and that we are all eternal beings here on a mission to transform ourselves in the world, like all that. Yeah, the intuition is spot on there. But then there's also some really wild and crazy ideas like, oh, and the moon is hollow and inhabited by aliens, and the earth is flat, and all these really wild ideas that have no basis in reality, because apophenia is occurring here, where our brain or our mind is trying to make sense of things, trying to make connections, and starts connecting unrelated things together. Like, oh, April 8th, solar eclipse and CERN and demon. Oh man, solar eclipse must be causing CERN to contact demons. No, it's just like the bunny in the clouds. It's not actually there. So that's an important thing to remember when approaching these sorts of things. But however, here's another interesting idea, and let's now start getting into what the eclipse actually is. Because so the eclipse is just one more point that I want to make about apophenia real quick is to point out how serious it is that apophenia taken to its extreme can actually lead to paranoid schizophrenia. So paranoid schizophrenia is where people start making connections that aren't there. So they'll start seeing danger or threats in everyday things, thinking that, everything is this conspiracy against them. Oh, I saw so-and-so whispering to so-and-so, and today I got a package in the mail and I don't know who it's from. They must be trying to kill me because, or whatever. That's what paranoid schizophrenia comes from, is when apophenia gets really extreme. So this is why apophenia is no joke. And that's why I often say you have to be careful when you get into intuitive spirituality or occultism or esoterica or any of these systems. You have to make sure that you're very grounded in logic and reason and understanding how to organize your thoughts in a way where you're protecting your mind, or you can literally go crazy. You can start believing things that have no basis in reality, like the earth being flat. And you want to be very careful that this doesn't occur. So I just want to point out how serious this is and why care needs to be taken when it comes to, the intuitive spirituality, esoteric, and occult. There's a lot we can learn from that. We talk about it all the time on my channel because there's a lot we can learn from it, but we have to go into it with a discerning eye, an eye of reason, to be able to understand the intuitive content that arises, because often the intuitive content that arises is archetypal. And so let's start to, take a look at what the eclipse actually is here. So let's see. Oh, right. So also for those who don't know, all right, let me just read this to you because it's kind of interesting. As millions of Americans are preparing to see today's rare total solar eclipse, some Christians are gearing up for the rapture. While everyone else is looking at the sun, others are thinking about the sun, like Jesus. It all began with an image that points to southern Illinois as the spot where the next eclipse is going to intersect with the path of the 2017 North American eclipse. So if you can see this, the path of the eclipse, when compared to the eclipse that occurred in 2017, it makes a cross. Big deal. Big deal. It says, from this, because of this, two theories have been birthed. First off, there's this idea that these eclipses are 7 years apart. And if you know anything about biblical symbolism, you know 7 is a holy number that symbolizes completeness, which is true. And then also that the eclipse, the paths form a cross. So do you see the apophenia taking place? Oh, 7 years apart, a cross. Jesus must be coming back because of the holy number 7 and the symbol of the cross. We're going to be raptured. This is a clear case of apophenia here. So I just wanted to point that out because it's kind of silly. Obviously, that didn't occur. That didn't happen. Of course, it's not. But let's start talking about what the eclipse actually is. Okay. So, well, we know that the eclipse is one celestial body blocking the view of another. The moon moves in front of the sun. That's what it is. But is it more than that? Well, let's think about astrology for a minute here. So on this website, which is marca.com, it says the total solar eclipse has spiritual significance for many. Now, this is where we're going to start getting into what the eclipse actually is, because it's more than simply one object blocking another. It is that, but it's more than that. How is it more than that? It is a symbolic archetypal event. And understanding the power of symbolic archetypal events can be very useful in transforming ourselves and transforming the world and transforming the universe. And I'll explain why in just a minute. But let's take a look at what this says. It says, according to Architectural Digest, the eclipse symbolizes a time of darkness and spiritual renewal, offering an opportunity for introspection and the shedding of old energies. So this is very powerful here, okay? So we can understand the eclipse as a symbolic representation of the idea of darkness and renewal, the covering of light and the birth of light again, a transformation, a transition, offering an opportunity, the darkness, for introspection and the shedding off of old energies to step into a new phase and a new power. So here's the thing. I see a lot of people making posts about, oh yeah, I'm going to get all this power from the solar eclipse, blah, blah, blah. It's not going to imbue you with some sort of, you're not going to get, oh my God, I feel the eclipse. No, that's not what's going to happen. Now, that doesn't mean some people won't feel it. Some people will feel it, just like people feel the Holy Spirit when they go to church, just like people feel that same feeling when they go to a concert and they feel their favorite musician. It can cause a feeling within one that's very, very real, but it's not an objective metaphysical ray or transformation or something. It is an internal mental transformation, and it's because one has attached extreme significance to it. And it's very powerful to attach extreme significance to things. That's what magic with a K, is all about. It's all about manipulating symbols in archetypes because of the power they have in the mind. Now, it doesn't happen because of some like metaphysical field that's radiating out from it or something. It's because of the powerful symbolic representations that it has in the mind. This is why when one is invoking, let's say, the archangels, Raphael, Uriel, Gabriel, Michael, let's say you're doing the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, you're invoking these archangels. You're not literally invoking angels. What you're doing is that these are forces in your mind, in your unconscious, that you are harnessing their power, and it has a very powerful psychological effect on you because you're harnessing these different powers within yourself, these different aspects of your unconscious, these different aspects of your mind. And these are very powerful things that can help you if they are accessed in a way, in a positive way. Now, this can get out of hand when you start believing these entities are real and maybe you start worshiping them and start giving away your power, then it becomes a problem. Everything should be tuned towards amplifying your own power or our collective power, never giving it away, either your own or collectively. And if it's going to be your own, make sure it's not at the expense of anyone else, but your own or collectively, not giving it away. There's a difference between enhancing collectively and giving it away. By giving it away, I mean giving it away to something that is not us or you. And by that, like an external God, like a deity that doesn't exist. I'm going to give my power away to an external deity. And that's what mainstream religion does to you. It strips away your divinity and you project it onto a being that doesn't exist. You are giving away your power in a very literal sense. You are giving away your power. Not in terms of like an energy field or something, but your capacity for enacting your will is dampened because of your projection of your power externally. So my point here is that when we come to the eclipse is an extremely powerful archetypal symbolic event that we can attach enormous meaning to. It's kind of like, I talked about this in our members only video where we were talking about spells and magic. It's kind of like, a great example is a birthday. When you have a birthday party, that's a ritual. You have a birthday party, you invite all your friends over, you blow out the candles, you make a wish. It's a ritual that you're doing. And what does it do? It makes that event significant. Really, it's just a day like any other day. But you are adding in all the symbolism, all this ritual, the giving of gifts, the opening of gifts, the eating of food, breaking bread together, blowing out candles, people singing to you. It's a very ritualistic event. It is a ritual. It's not like one, it is one. And it gives meaning and purpose to life. It makes life worth living. But you don't believe that it's literally, like when you make the wish, this is the point I made in the members only video, when you make a wish on your birthday, you don't literally believe that that wish is going to come true. If you did, that would be very detrimental to your life. If you're like, oh, I wish for $1 million. And so you totally believe that's going to come true. So you end up quitting your job because you're like, I don't need my job anymore. I wished for $1 million. While that might seem kind of silly, it is kind of silly, but that's exactly what happens when people are like, oh, I can give people a $777 tip because I'm going to be raptured on Monday. So I don't need to worry about it. So you have people taking symbolic events and interpreting them literally, which can have very negative consequences. So another really good example is like New Year's. New Year's is a great ritualistic day where, like the eclipse, it symbolizes the end of the old and the birth of the new. The end of the old, the birth of the new beginnings. That's why New Year's is so important for Neogenians. That's why the eclipse is a very powerful symbol for Neogenians. It's the end of the old and the birth of the new, symbolizes new beginnings. And what do you do on New Year's? You make commitments. You make New Year's resolutions. Oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to work really hard on my diet, or I'm going to start working out, or I'm going to volunteer at this place I've been wanting to volunteer for this cause I care about, or any number of these things. I'm going to, try and improve my relationship with my partner and work on, being nicer, whatever. You make some sort of resolution. And this is very, very powerful because you're using that. And see, if those rituals weren't there, that wouldn't happen. That wouldn't be there. And so while clearly nothing is actually happening on a metaphysical level when on New Year's, it has an enormous power for change and transformation when it's done in a way where you understand that it's not, again, you don't want to believe that it's literally true. So, but here's something I want to talk about here with astrology, okay? So it says, in astrology, the eclipse signifies the darkness of the ego and the potential for spiritual rebirth. That's very cool, all right? So it symbolizes the darkness of the ego and the potential for spiritual rebirth, marking a moment to release past patterns and embrace new perspectives. Renowned publication La Opinion highlights the transformative energy of the upcoming eclipse, noting its alignment with the new Aries moon, a time for setting intentions and planting seeds of intention for the future. So these ideas in astrology, like the darkness of the ego and potential of spiritual rebirth and setting intentions, planting seeds of intentions for the future, very much like a New Year's resolution. These are all very powerful archetypal symbolism and ritual to associate with the eclipse. But here's the problem when it comes to astrology. When astrology is understood to be an archetypal system of symbolism, then it's fine. And it can be very powerful like this. When you go, oh, astrologically speaking, this represents spiritual rebirth and the darkness of the ego. I'm going to set intentions for the future here because of these astrological archetypal symbolism. That's healthy and that's fine. That's great. However, the problem is that astrology is a system of symbolism and it's archetypal. This is the same position that Carl Jung had on astrology. It has nothing to do with actual celestial bodies having actual effects on humans and metaphysics and the immaterial domain. There's not there's no radiating field that's going to transform your light body. That doesn't mean it's not powerful. You can use these extremely powerful symbolic events and astrological archetypes to enhance your life. But if you believe they're literally true, then it starts to become a problem. Why does it start to become a problem? Well, something like this, it doesn't really seem like it's much of a problem, but you have to think of the system as a whole, kind of like the idea of Mercury retrograde. I can't tell you how many people who are like constantly blaming their problems and their own personality flaws on Mercury retrograde. Oh, I'm sorry, I've been such an asshole lately. It's just Mercury retrograde. No, you're an asshole and you should work on yourself. And you are using Mercury retrograde as a scapegoat. So blaming the position of the planets on your lack of self-awareness and self-actualization impedes your growth and our collective growth, because you are part of the collective and it affects how you treat people when you have these different beliefs. So I just want to point that out, that like when it comes to astrology, astrology is a powerful system of symbolism, but it should not be taken to be literally true. Just like when you do that, LBRP, lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, you are invoking, when you invoke the archangels, you're invoking aspects of yourself, not literal angels. Same thing when it comes to astrological symbolism. It doesn't have to do with literally how the planets are arranged. It has to do with the structure of the mind and the structure of the psyche. So it's a very important thing to say and make a point, because when you start, this is apophenia, and this is a big hindrance to ultimately growth. Now, for some people, it can be a stepping stone. Something like astrology, okay, it's way better than mainstream religion, okay? It's a step up. But if your goal, and the goal of this channel is to provide you with the tools and information necessary for reaching the highest level of consciousness. If your goal is to reach higher levels of consciousness, you have to be on the lookout for apophenia. And as long as you're blaming your problem on the planets, you're not going to be doing the personal work that you need to be doing. So that's very important to understand when it comes to astrology, when it comes to interpreting these things that are happening, not to take them literally, but you can still use them symbolically. You can still use the sign that if you relate to your astrological sign, there's nothing wrong with relating to it and using that symbolism and using that archetypal imagery, just like we used a ton of other, like when we talk about being the second coming of Christ, that's using the archetypal imagery from certain religious patterns. And, if we were to talk in terms of like Brahman and Atman, relating to Brahman being the ultimate ground of reality, Atman being the eternal soul, Atman realizing that they are one with Brahman and are Brahman. That's Hindu symbolism, Hindu archetypal symbolism, particular Advaita Vedanta. But this is the idea is that we can use this in a way where we are transforming ourselves through imbuing symbolic significance on these systems. And you can see how other like major so okay, look, there's this other quote that I want to read to you. All right, so this was posted on, I don't know if it was on Facebook or Instagram or what, but it's someone called someone just called Empath. And this is a quote they said, "The eclipse is resetting the energy. This is not a metaphor. You can feel it physically. This is so because it will cleanse your nadi system. Many people didn't even realize they have a nadi system until an eclipse drains them of life force and they feel it. So now a good time to fast from eating meat, heavy foods, and from having intercourse, as these are all things that use life force. Happy new moon." All right, so do you see the problem of taking it literal? And I think that that's a really good example here. They're saying the eclipse is resetting energy. Yes, in a symbolic and metaphorical way. It's about transitions. It's about new beginnings. It's about doing away with the old and creating the new, doing away with dispelling the darkness and stepping into the light. Yes, absolutely. But not literally. It's not going to cleanse your nadi system. You're not going to feel drained from life force today. I don't feel drained from life force today. I feel just fine. Why don't I feel drained from life? So if this were true, right? If this were actually real, we would have billions of people being so drained today that I think we would notice. But there's plenty of people who are walking around feeling like they're just fine. Some people aren't. How come some people aren't? Well, because they have this belief, and it's just like people who feel the Holy Spirit when they're at church singing songs. It's not literally the Holy Spirit, but it's the power of collective resonance. It's the power of being in a situation where your emotions and feelings are building up inside of you, and you're having this spiritual experience because you're connecting with others of a like-mindedness. It has a very real effect, but it's not a objectively metaphysical field that's being projected or anything like that. So when you start talking about, oh, well, and what is the nadi system, by the way? The nadi system is like your astral body. And, the astral body, it's related to the different chakras and energy centers, etc. Now, it is possible that we have some sort of astral or frequency correspondence with our avatar. That is very possible. The exact, if that is in fact true though, and if so, how it works is something that requires research. We don't know. And anyone telling you that they do know, they're lying to you. We don't have the capacity to know. We can know that by starting to, that's why in the Neogenian system, we have our system of meta-rationalism, which is about understanding metaphysics rationally. We need to start putting these things on firm ground. Like understanding that would be a very interesting field of study. But right now, we can't be like, oh yeah, so the eclipse is going to drain your astral body of its energy. There is no good reason to think that that's true. Now, is it possible? Yes, there is a tiny chance that it could be possible because there's a lot of things that could be possible, but it's so incredibly unlikely and there's no good evidence to suggest it when there should be. If it's something that's draining a lot of people, this is something that should be noticed. I feel fine. I don't feel my nadi energy, system being drained. I feel fine. And if you're telling people, okay, now you need to stop eating, well, stop eating meat is always a good advice. I'm vegan, but not because of the eclipse, because I want to reduce unnecessary suffering in the world. And I think we have enough suffering. So I want to reduce that when it comes to animals. But when you're saying like, oh, stop eating certain foods and don't have intercourse because these are things that use life force. And I guess you need to preserve your life force because of the eclipse or something. Do you see how we have to be careful? Because this is just becoming a new religion. It's like, oh, don't wear like in the Bible, don't eat these certain foods. Don't wear this certain kind of cloth. Don't, here's the 10 Commandments. Here's all these list of rules that you have to do. Why? I don't know. Same thing with this now. when you start to take these systems literally, it's like, oh, well, Mercury's in retrograde or the eclipse is coming. Make sure you don't have intercourse. Make sure you don't. It's just the beginnings of a new kind of religion. And we want to stay away from religious thinking. So whenever something is proposed, there needs to be a reason behind it. And so, for example, when I promote veganism, well, there's a reason behind it. It's because I want to, and I think it's important to reduce unnecessary suffering in the world. Why? Because we are all minds, we are all souls, we are all zetas together having this collective experience here to learn, grow, and understand. And ultimately, we are all reflections of the absolute network mind. And so we're all reflections of each other. So for me to harm you would be like me harming myself because we're just different reflections of the absolute network. And so ultimately to hurt animals are housing souls or zetas as well, is causing unnecessary suffering and restricting the growth of that soul. And so I'm definitely not saying you have to be vegan to be Neogenian. That's not true. But I definitely encourage you to think about it. But my point is here not to talk about veganism, even though it's important in my opinion. But it's a good example as to, you see, there are reasons behind things. I'm not just being like, oh, well, the sun's going to suck up your energy, so you better stay away from this kind of food. Well, it's like, why? Wait, why is the sun going to suck up my body? Well, because of your naughty system. But what does that have to do? How does that work? And there's never a good explanation as to why any of these things do. It's just like, oh, well, because we feel it does. And that's not a good explanation. It's just feeling that something is true can be an indication, but it doesn't represent truth. Plenty of people feel crazy things, and that's how religions are started. And we want to stay away from starting new religions. So we need to stay intuitively connected to the source, but remain rationally and logically grounded. We need both. We don't want to give up one or the other. We don't want to embrace reason and give up our connection to the immaterial domain. And we don't want to connect to the immaterial domain and give up reason, because the immaterial domain is filled with archetypal imagery, which requires rational integration for us to make use of that powerful content. So it's very important to realize that these ideas are very powerful, but they should not be taken to be literally true, or it can lead to a lot of problems. And I'm very passionate about this because I grew up in a strict Christian household. And for those who don't have firsthand experience in a system of religion, it's hard to understand sometimes how powerfully restrictive and dangerous it is. So when you have people being like, oh, the eclipse is a sign from God of his, of his second coming, it's the same thing as someone going, oh, the eclipse is resetting your naughty energy. That you're physically being drained of your life force. That is equivalent to, or the intuitive spiritual analog to Christians being like, oh, the eclipse is the second coming, symbolizing the second, a sign of the second coming of Christ. It's not literally any of these things. It's metaphorically these things. It's symbolically these things. It's symbolically the resetting of energy so that you can shed off the old and step into the new. It's symbolic of the second coming of Christ as the light of a new world, the light of a new consciousness, the light of transformation. Now, does it literally mean these things? No, it's the moon being in front of the sun. That's all it is. But we assign significance to it, and that is what makes it powerful, when we assign significance to it. So you can imagine like the solar eclipse as being a giant cosmic reset button. That's essentially what it is. And for us Neogenians, when our aim is to create a new beginning and a new earth, the eclipse is a very powerful symbol, just like New Year's is a very powerful symbol. It's the end of the old and the birth of the new. And the eclipse is a very powerful archetypal symbol that has the interplay of shadow and light. First, the shadow as the moon blocks the sun, and this can create a moment of representing stillness and introspection. This dark aspect is a time where we consider and look within and consider the parts of ourselves and the world that we want to change. That's what it is. It's an internal introspection, thinking, what do I want to change about myself? What do I want to give up? What do I want to let go of that's holding me back? What do I want to work towards to actualize myself and have a better life? What do I want to change about the world? What can I do to help move consciousness forward? What can I do to help transform this place that we're in right now? This is what the dark aspect represents. And then the emergence of the sun is the external, it's the illumination of our path forward. It's the inspiration to action, right? While the darkness is the inner introspection, the light is the external aspect of action, where we actually move ahead and enact our plans for our personal renewal and transformation and the creation of the new earth. So for us as Neogenians, the solar eclipse is a very powerful symbol of new beginnings. Neogenian means new beginning. It reminds us that darkness is temporary and light, representing knowledge, wisdom, and unity, will always return. And not only that, but that is what we are here to instill and create. That's why I always say, we are the second coming of Christ, related to the rise of a new consciousness, the dawn of the new mind. It's about bringing forth a new humanity, a new mind, and a new earth, one where we live in harmony with each other and the planet. Guided how? How do we do this? Through attaining all awareness and hyper awareness, the understanding that we are all in interconnected unity, experiencing each other. So a solar eclipse is nothing that's going to be like physically draining your body. It's not CERN trying to contact a demon. That'd be pretty cool if it was, but it's not. It's not about any, rapture occurring. All right. What it is one celestial body blocking another, but it has very powerful archetypal power for us to assign value and assign meaning to represent shedding our old ways, shedding what's holding us back, and stepping into a brighter, more enlightened future, doing away with the old and stepping into the new, like the snake that sheds off its old skin, like the butterfly that emerges from a chrysalis. You see, these are all symbols for the same archetypal pattern, whether it's an eclipse or a snake shedding its skin or a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis. These are all the end of the old and the birth of the new. Remember, this is the apocalypse, but truly in what the apocalypse actually means. Apocalypse means unveiling. It's an unveiling of a new world, a new earth, a new beginning. It's not about death and destruction and chaos. You have people who look at new beginnings as though they were a terrible thing and go, it's Armageddon, it's the end of the world. It's not Armageddon, it's not the end of the world. It's the birth of the new. It's a new world, a transformative world, a world that we are going to create right here and right now. And we have the power to do this as long as we come together and transform ourselves and take real concrete steps toward creating the world that we envision, because it all begins as an idea in our minds, together, collectively, and we will manifest it. We will form it. And by our will, it will be done. A world of peace, a world of unity, a world of sustainability. And this archetypally, the solar eclipse, it reflects that process. We just have to actually make it happen. So this is a really good example. There are a lot of things in the world, a lot of archetypal events that occur, a lot of ritual, a lot of symbol, a lot of archetypes, and especially delving into New Age spirituality, you're going to come across this stuff all the time. From an archetypal symbolic position, these things are very powerful, and we assign value to them and we assign meaning to them. But let's stay rooted in logic and reason so that we can actually harness its power. Do you see how much more powerful it is to harness it this way? By saying, I understand this as being an archetypally significant symbol for doing away with the old and stepping into the new. And I'm going to take action right now by looking within, seeing what I need to change, and then taking the action to change it. You see how much more powerful that is than being like, oh, well, be careful. It's going to drain your naughty energy. So you got to not eat certain foods and don't have sex. No. Now, there are a lot of systems that will interpret it in a more positive way, like the different astrological interpretation of the ego and a spiritual transformation. That's fine. But still, when it's taken to be literal, it's dampening the power that you could have when you actually understand what the process truly is. And when you understand how something works, you can use it much better. And so you can, otherwise you might use it in a way that's ultimately going to impede your progress. Like I said, it might be helpful to believe certain aspects, but then, oh, well, Mercury retrograde's happening. That's why I've been an asshole lately. Sorry. These excuses are ultimately impeding your development. So the eclipse, it's the moon blocking the sun, but it's an extremely powerful archetypal event that is very significant in the Neogenian system, as all archetypal symbols for the end of the old and the birth of the new, or transitions and transformations, are. And we can use that to reflect on ourselves and reflect on the world, on what we want to change about us and Earth, and then taking the action to make that happen. So I hope you enjoyed that, my friends. I have a lot of videos on my channel. You should go check them out if you're interested. Go take a look. And as always, please like and subscribe so that we can spread this information. Like I said, it's about spreading information. When you like and subscribe, it helps spread that information. And follow me on Spotify, Dawn of the New Earth. Go give me a follow on the podcast there. Helps out a lot. Helps spread information on new platforms. My new book, Neogenesis, Dawn of the New Mind, will be released on May 16th on Amazon. So keep your eyes open for that. And as always, hey, I want to remind you, first, if you enjoy my work, support over on patreon.com for members only videos, patreon.com/MorgueOfficial. The link's right down here. There's a lot of members only videos, or you can support at tier 2 or higher here on YouTube by hitting the join button. But all that aside, I want to remind you, it's not church, so don't feel obligated to support monetarily. There are plenty of free ways you can support. Like I said, following on Spotify, liking and sharing, that helps out a lot. And I want to shout out those who support. It means a lot to me. I want to give a big shout out to Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, the Halloween Mom, DB, Fashida, Nusalina, Eric, Christopher Smith, Joel, Thomas, Ryan, and everyone else. You guys are great. Thank you so much.